Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Today is Friday, June 9th, 2023. Thankfully, my voice is better, so I can speak like a normal person. I'm very happy to say that. So, having said that, today is Book Review Friday, and we are continuing our review of the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. So at this point, I just want to ask, has anybody finally opened the book? Has anybody read the book? Has anybody read the book? Anybody at all? Nobody? Nobody has read the book till now? Is that a yes? Is that a no? I mean, I'm hearing silence. I guess the answer is nobody has read the book. Guys, let me say this. I've said this before. I'll say this again. We are business partners. We, me and you listening, if you're in my organization, which is Team Alpha, you are my business partner and I am your business partner. What does that mean? That means we are in business together. If I am doing the heavy lifting to make our relationship better, to make you wealthier, because we are in business, and I say, okay, here is the task you need to do for yourself so that we can have a common, I don't want to say level field, that's not the word I'm looking for, so that we can be in alignment mentally, and you don't do your part, you are hurting yourself, because what that means is I can't rob ideas off of you, even though you can rob ideas off of me. So my suggestion, my recommendation, my whatever you want to call it, please, when we have a book review, open the book and read it. It's for your benefit. Books feed your head. You will be a better person when you start reading. Anyway, having said that, let's move on to the main course. It's Book Review Friday, and this is one of my favorite days of the week because we get to discuss amazing books that hopefully everybody will read at some point. And this week we are continuing with Angela Duckworth's book, Grit. Last week we covered the 4 chapters. This week we are jumping into chapter 5. Chapter 5, the brief summary is this. In this chapter, she talks about genetics and environment in shaping grit. She talks about, some people have a genetic predisposition for grit, but she also talks about the importance of environmental factors such as parenting, culture, and mentors. She suggests that we can all become grittier by changing our mindset and habits. So, for starters, the amount of grit most people have is influenced by their genes and their experience. Nature and nurture both matter. If you were born in an environment which is devoid of grit, well, chances are you might not have grit. If you were nurtured in an environment where, if you come from a lineage of people who don't have grit, her argument is you also might not have grit. And she says that the biological aspects of grit are determined by the interactions of hundreds of genes. Like there isn't just one grit gene that you have it. So because you have that grit gene, you're good to go. She says that's not the case, that there are hundreds of grit genes that interact together. She also says that, genes don't explain why entire populations change over time. Human intelligence, which is IQ, intelligence quotient, test scores have increased dramatically over the last 100 years. She talks about a scientist from New Zealand, Jim Flynn, who studies this phenomenon, and he calls it the Flynn effect. He says that as society changes, skills improve exponentially. And a good example he used, which I agree with, is basketball. He says basketball today is much more competitive than it was in the early 1900s. And Flynn says the reason for this is because of TV. He says more and more people are exposed to the sport, and people who are exposed to basketball begin emulating the athletes they saw on the screen. So children in the late 20th century were better at basketball than children in the early 20th century because they were exposed to what professionals were doing and then expanded on it. And I can speak on this myself because growing up, the NBA wasn't it wasn't back then what it is today. You know, back then you had superstars like unarguably who I think is still the best basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan. But a lot of the stuff Michael Jordan used to do that awed everybody, a lot of basketball players are able to do today. Not all, a lot of it. So again, people watch Jordan, they emulate Jordan, they do what Jordan does. Another example is, the 5-minute mile. And she didn't use this example, I'm using it. Prior to, I think, 1953, nobody had run a mile in 5 minutes. And in 1953, after it was run for the first time, and I forget the person's name, after that, within a year, I can't remember how many people ran the 5-minute mile. Same thing with climbing Mount Everest. I watched something last week about people who die on Mount Everest, they just leave their bodies there. So now people have nicknames for people who are dead on Mount Everest because they don't take the bodies down. So somebody's nickname is Green Boots, somebody's nickname is Red Jacket, somebody's nickname is Blue Scarf, and so on and so forth. Why am I telling you this? Because prior to, I believe it was in the 50s, nobody had ever scaled Mount Everest. It was undone. And then Sir Edmund Hillary, and I'm using this example, it's not in the book, Sir Edmund Hillary scaled Mount Everest with the help of Tesling, I don't remember the guy's name, a Nepalese guy. Well, of course, the credit went to Edmund Hillary. After he scaled Mount Everest, can't even tell you how many people have scaled it. Why? Because people saw him do it, or at least read about it. Also, so again, when you do something, other people emulate you, do it and do it better. Also, she talks, now back to what she said, she talks about grit seems to have a reverse Flynn effect. She said older people today are grittier than younger people. And she said that's because they came from an age or an era that focused more on hard work and perseverance than today. And another theory is that grit increases over the span of a person's life. The maturation story is that we develop the capacity for long-term passion and perseverance as we grow older. Now, I don't know if I agree with this. I've been gritted since I was a child, but I guess for some people that's the case. And she also postulates that studies have shown that personality is influenced by life experiences and changing circumstances. People's habits and personalities, including their aptitude for grit, change as they are forced to adapt to the world around them. This means that a person's capacity for grit can grow. And this I will actually agree with. Having lived a significant portion of my life in Africa, specifically in Nigeria, over there you see children as young as 5 or 6 hawking on the street. You see a 6-year-old child with a tray on their head being trained on how to sell stuff to people. A 6-year-old child carrying a tray selling. I mean, the parents give them little things to sell, nothing major. But this child, develops the capacity for walking all day in the sun with something on their head. It's sad, but it does happen. So obviously, by the time they are preteens or teens or adults, they're able to do things that regular children should never have had to experience. So anyway, she closes this chapter out by talking about people who exemplify grit. And she says, people who exemplify grit have 4 universal qualities. And I suggest you write this down if you aren't writing anything else. She said, and nobody's camera is on. This is, you guys just don't like listening, do you? Okay, anyway. She talks about people who personify grit. And she says that there are 4 qualities. And what are these qualities, you may ask? Well, quality number 1 is they have a deep interest in what they do. They have a deep interest in what they do. Now, I will argue that it doesn't necessarily need to be a deep interest in what they do, but more along the lines. Well, actually, that's number 3. So let me not even say that. I'll say it after it's number 3. So they are deeply interested in what they do. They want to get better at what they do. Number 2, they practice regularly, sometimes for hours a day. Number 3, which is what I was going to kind of touch on, that kind of carries over with number 1, they feel their work has a greater purpose. So they think what they're doing is bigger than themselves. And number 4, they continue going even when things are difficult. And she calls this 4th quality hope. These 4 qualities are not always inherent within us, but they can be developed over time. And folks, again, nobody's camera is on. I don't see a single person. If I give you the respect of being on camera, please reciprocate. Again, we are business partners. This is not supposed to be an abusive relationship where you take from me and you don't give back. I don't ask you to do anything for me, but just show that you appreciate what is being done by playing your position, which means have your camera on during M3 meetings. So again, the 4 qualities are they're deeply interested in what they do, they practice regularly, they feel their work has a greater purpose, and they continue going even when things are difficult. So if you want to have grit, you have to have those 4 things. And like I said, number 3 and number 1, I'll tie them in together by saying you see the bigger picture. Like, why do I do what I'm doing right now? I'm not doing it because I need it for myself. Thankfully, I have other options in life. But I do it because I believe that I'm going to create more millionaires than anybody has created other than maybe Art Williams when it comes to this business. And I'm focused on that. I have sold out to that concept. So even if I have to keep on giving, when my voice was gone yesterday, I still did what I had to do. Today, my voice is still, it's better, but it's struggling. I'm still doing what I have to do. Why? Because I have grit. Anyway, that's chapter 5. The next chapter, which is chapter 6, is she focuses on the first asset of grit, which is interest. She explains how finding something that fascinates us and makes us happy is essential for developing passion and perseverance. She advises us to follow our curiosity and explore our interest without worrying about finding our ultimate passion. So what does that mean in simple English? She says that many people say the key to a successful career is being passionate about your work. She said her father told her as she was growing up that wasn't a good strategy for anyone who wanted a high-income, high-status job. However, research indicates that people are happier and perform better when they have a job that fits their personal interest. She talks about a 2014 Gallup poll indicating that more than 66% of American adults did not feel engaged by their work. She said around the world, 87% of adults say they are unengaged with their work. She thinks the problem isn't that following one's passion isn't profitable or possible. It's that most people don't have a passion in the first place. So again, most people, her argument is that most people are simply not passionate, period, point blank, bottom line. And she said, that finding one's passion doesn't happen like it's portrayed in the movies. That passions are fostered slowly over time as people dig deeper into their interests. Like for me, I'm not passionate about finance. I'm not like, oh my God, what's the beta, alpha, this, that? Oh, wow, let me be the expert on freaking whole life verse. I mean, I'm an expert on these things, but I'm not like driven by that let me discover the everything about every single whole life, universal life. No, but I'm passionate about developing leaders. And so again, and that passion came over time. But again, the bottom line is, I am passionate. You have to be passionate about what you're doing. She talks about, there's a college in Pennsylvania called Swarthmore College. There's a professor there named Barry Schwartz. And she said he thinks young adults have unrealistic expectations, both in their careers and in love. She said they want perfect jobs and perfect partners from the very beginning. She said they don't realize that these things take time and growth. She argues that developing a passion for one's work takes discovery, development, and a lifetime of deepening. Interests arise not out of self-introspection, but through repeated and varied interactions with the world. And she argues that experimentation with different areas of interest is crucial. Thank you, Martin. Martin is the only person in this whole thing whose camera is actually on. Martin, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. The rest of you, I don't know what you're doing with yourself if you can't have your camera on a leadership meeting. She says that she said, as you're developing your passion, support from parents, teachers, coaches, and peers is also important. Why? Because they help people learn from and about things, and they provide feedback about performance. She said people, especially parents, often forget that grit is not just about passion, it's also about perseverance. She said nobody will continue pursuing something that doesn't interest them. So this is, and this, how does this tie into Primerica? How does this tie into your business? This ties into your business because if you are not passionate about your own success, you wouldn't do what you have to do here. The mistake a lot of people make is they think they have to do what they have to do here to go be in finance. No, guys, this business has, success in this business has very little to do with financial services if you are looking at it from the perspective of a business owner. If you're looking at it from the perspective of a business owner, then again, like I said, financial services is the vehicle. It's like owning a McDonald's. Being passionate about burgers and fries isn't why you have a McDonald's. What you have to be interested in, and this is me saying, what you have to be interested in is the success you are going to get as an individual who has a life full of hope that they want to live, or that they are living a life where you can achieve more than you've ever had before. She quotes psychologist Benjamin Bloom, who says the development of skill has 3 phases, and this applies to everybody. He said, when people are younger, they figure out what they like and what they don't like. She says play and exploration are very important here, as is personal autonomy. Most people develop passions about things they choose themselves, not things that are chosen for them. And she says that parents take a fairly hands-off approach during the early years if they want their kids to be successful. She says if you start rushing a beginner, you bludgeon their budding interest. She quoted a person who does crosswords for the New York Times, which is literally the most prestigious crossword in the world. Yes, there's such a thing. She said he credits his mother's support and gentle prodding with forming the foundation of his career at an early age. He says his mother gave him the tools needed and showed him how to submit his work. He said his mother was encouraging, not demanding. Jeff Bezos, whom everybody here knows as the founder of Amazon, says his mother did the same thing. She may not have always understood his science experiments, but she listened and helped when asked. She says humans are innately drawn to the new. If something is new and shiny, people are drawn to it. And she said that the greater people are, the fewer times they will change their career paths or interests. So for example, I know I have grit. I have been with this business for 18 years. That's great. And I'm not saying that I've been the most successful person in every aspect of this business, because I've had other passions, not business related, political related, and I've said my story before. But I've had that passion. And she said that's why gritty people are an anomaly. She said being a gritty person is not the norm, it's an exception. And she said grittier people stick with things much longer than the rest of the population. Fostering passion begins with discovery. Duckworth advises readers to think about what they find enjoyable and what they find unbearable. The next step is doing something. Doing something is the next step. Once interests are identified, it's time to develop them. Ask questions and find others with similar interests. What does she say next? She says, get a mentor and keep digging for more information. If after a few years, interest is still there, but the passion isn't, dig deeper to satisfy the need for novelty. So that's chapter 6. Chapter 7, she talks about the second aspect of grit. Remember, the first aspect of grit is interest. The second aspect, and guys, again, if you read this book, you'll have notes too. But anyway, second aspect of grit is what? Practice. She explains how deliberate practice, a specific type of practice that involves setting goals, seeking feedback, and refining skills, is crucial for improving performance and achieving mastery. She shares examples of how gritty people use deliberate practice to hone their craft and overcome what? Plateaus. So, and Martin will know what this word is. She says the most successful paragons of grit exhibit the desire for what is called Kaizen. Martin, do you know what Kaizen is? I know you know what Kaizen is. It's in Japanese. You speak Japanese. You don't know what Kaizen is? Kaizen was a word popularized by Honda, and it means continuous improvement. She said the most successful paragons of grit exhibit a desire for what the Japanese call Kaizen, again, which is literally continuous improvement. She talks about Swedish psychologist K. Anders Ericsson, who studies how experts amass their skills. Duckworth calls him the world expert on expert. His research indicates that it takes an average of 10,000 hours of practice spread over 10 years to become an expert at something. The reason I'm an expert at this joint, at this thing, is because I put in more than that amount of time. Heck, I put in 12 hours a day, probably 300 days. Let me even calculate how much that is. Hold on one second. 10 times 365. Okay, I've put in 3,000. I put in 3,600. Actually, no, let's say I put in 350 days a year. 15 days I don't do anything because I still work Saturdays and Sundays. So 3,500 times 18. I have put in 63,000 hours. The person you see speaking or the person you hear speaking, I have put in 63,000 hours into becoming an authority at this business. When I talk to you, listen to me because I know what I'm saying. I am a literal expert. Anyway, I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you, take advantage. You have a person who has put 63,000 hours. Even if I divide that in two, it's still 31,500 hours. So anyway, she says the most important finding in Ericsson's research is that experts practice differently from the rest of the population. She calls this deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is characterized by focusing on one's weakness. Those who practice deliberately set stretch goals for themselves, such as swimming a lap faster than they did the day before, or conquering a particularly tricky section of a song. They then get feedback on how they did so they can learn how to improve next time. Once one stretch goal is mastered, another takes its place. Deliberate practice works in every line of work, creative or not. I do that. Do you? Together, Duckworth and Ericsson studied how gritty children triumph at the National Spelling Bee. They learned that spellers who did deliberate practice of memorizing new words, reviewing learned words, and mastering Latin and Greek word origins performed better than those who did passive practice, such as learning and playing word games. Deliberate practice takes more effort and isn't as fun as other types of preparation. It's also mentally exhausting. Experts at the top of their field can handle about an hour of deliberate practice at a time and up to 5 hours a day. She also spoke about Hungarian-American psychologist Mihail Csikszentmihalyi. That's the name. Csikaz, something. Disagrees with Ericsson. This gets into Mihaly studies flow, which is a state of complete concentration. When someone is in flow, the work they are doing feels effortless. And you guys have heard of the flow. The flow is being in the zone. When you are in the zone, you don't want to be interrupted. Every day when I come here, I get in the zone. And I was thinking to myself, my zone is usually late in the night. I don't know why. I wish it was early in the morning, but it's usually late at night. That's when I'm most creative and so on and so forth. Duckworth hosted a debate about passion and world-class performance between Erickson and Mihaly. A conclusion about expert performance, arduous work versus effortless joy, was never reached. So both arguments, effortless joy and arduous work, both arguments were made. So Duckworth decided to find people who had taken the Griffith scale self-assessment. If you don't know what that is, it's on YouTube. We recorded last week's session. Go read it or go listen to it. We spoke about that last week. So she found people who had taken the grit scale self-assessment and asked them about flow. And she learned that the gritty adults experience more flow or more being in the zone. Deliberate practice and being in the zone aren't opposites. They are partners. One is a behavior, the other is a feeling, and they're generally not experienced at the same time. As Duckworth said, deliberate practice is for preparation and flow is for performance. So for example, when I was getting ready for today's training, I was deliberately reading what I have to read. Now that I've read it and now that I'm here, I am in the zone, I'm flowing effortlessly. So that's an example of both things going together. Duckworth also discovered that gritty people found deliberate practice more pleasurable than those who weren't particularly gritty. Duckworth has two theories about this. The first is that gritty people learn to love the rewards of hard work. The second is that gritty people are by nature more likely to enjoy a challenge. I love challenges. Somebody will say, I love problems always. I love solving people's problems. I love challenges. Some people practice a lot but never get better. That's because they're not practicing deliberately. They're just going through the motions. She says deliberate practice requires a stretch goal, complete concentration and effort, feedback and repetition with reflection and refinement. Deliberate practice should be a habit. Do it at the same time and place every day. She didn't say this, but it's the same as the Pomodoro technique. I've said this to you guys numerous times. When I wake up in the morning, I pray, and then what do? I read. Now I pray at like 3:40 something a.m. So after that, I take another hour of sleep. And then when I wake up by 5, first thing I do, I go over my vision board, I meditate, and then I read. Because it's effortless and it's done the same time, which is when I wake up, same place in my bed. And also, Duckworth suggests removing self-judgment and the pressure to be perfect. You don't need to be perfect, people. You definitely don't need to be perfect. Failure is how people learn and grow. It should not be the cause for shame. So as long as you're growing and improving, you will be more than okay. And that is it for today. We finished chapter 7. Next thing is next week, we will cover chapter what? We will cover chapter 8. I will say this again. If you are serious about reading and becoming better, please read this book. We've already gone through, the book has 12 chapters, so we shall finish next week. But again, if you want to be a better version of yourself, read this book. You can't go wrong with this book. This is an amazing, amazing book, guys. You will learn so much and it will help you stretch your thinking in ways you can't even imagine. Anyway, having said that, that's it for me. Always a pleasure, obviously, to be here with you guys and share this with you guys. So God bless Team Alpha, God bless America. Zoom is staying on, bring people in, let's recruit the world. But this training